In 1961, a plasterer's son in Youngstown, Ohio, woke at 5:45 every Saturday morning for 11 years without an alarm. Not because he loved it, because his father drilled one rule into him before he turned 8. A man who needs to be called twice is not a man anyone calls again. By 16, that boy had re-roofed 2 neighbors' sheds, kept a savings envelope in the same drawer every week, and could shake the hand of every working man on the block without an introduction. He did not learn this in school. He learned it on Saturday mornings, under rules so quietly enforced that the generation who lived them never thought of them as rules at all. They thought of them as being raised right. We abandoned every one of them the moment we decided Saturday mornings belonged to the children. American schools taught those rules once, not from textbooks, from shop programs and the deliberate culture of men who believed a boy's character was built before noon. Then 1970 arrived and the rules were called rigid, authoritarian, the kind of discipline that produced workers, not free thinkers. We abandoned them, sent boys home to cartoons and called it progress. 1 in 5 American men between 30 and 50 now reports feeling purposeless on weekends. We never stopped to ask why. We knew. These rules were not lost to time. They were buried by choice. Number 22 on this list was so automatic in working-class homes that fathers enforced it in silence. A single look, no words. The behavior corrected in under 4 seconds. Number 11 contradicts every piece of modern productivity advice about getting ahead and finishing first. And number 3, the rule every skilled tradesman passed to his apprentice before the boy touched a single tool is now a billable concept in corporate leadership seminars, charging $4,000 for a weekend. The old way cost nothing. These 30 rules were not about making boys obedient. They were about making boys capable. The kind of capable that does not require applause, a performance review, or a ribbon. The kind that shows up before the sun and gets to work. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 30 Saturday morning rules American schools banned after 1970 that built real working-class men. Number 30. Rise. Before the house. This was the rule before every other rule. You were dressed before your mother called, downstairs before your father's alarm. For a furnace worker's son in Canton, Ohio, this was the first moment he understood what dignity felt like, not handed to him, not yet earned, just chosen in a dark room before anyone was watching. Working-class fathers never stated this rule aloud. The father rose at 5. If his son was already dressed, nothing needed saying. The day belonged to the man who started it first. Number 29, dress for the work before you know the task. Work clothes went on before breakfast, before the task was named. Work shirt, work pants, boots laced, not pajamas. A plumber's son in Akron did this every Saturday for 9 years and said later that dressing before knowing the task was the whole lesson. It told his body what the day was for before his mind decided. Shop programs in Pittsburgh enforced the same discipline through the early 1960s. You arrived dressed to work. The clothes were not the uniform. They were the decision. Number 28. The Friday night list. Saturday's work was planned the night before. Your father wrote it down. Gutters, fence post, storm windows. The list was on the counter when you came downstairs. You read it once. You did not negotiate. For a machinist's son in Toledo, that list was a contract, proof that someone had decided the morning mattered before it arrived. Detroit shop instructors assigned the Friday list through the 1950s and required each boy to report what he completed. A plan made the night before is a promise made to the morning. Number 27, breakfast earned. One task came before the meal: split the wood, sweep the walk, carry the ashes. Then you ate. A coal miner's son in Scranton asked his father why once. His father said, "A man earns what he takes." The boy was 9. He never asked again. Vocational programs in Kentucky ran the same sequence through the early 1960s: first task, then break. The earned rest meant something the unearned rest never could. The food was the same, the hunger was different. Number 26. Work beside the man teaching you, never ahead. You matched his pace, watched his hands before you moved your own. You did not race ahead, because ahead meant you had abandoned the lesson. A carpenter's apprentice in Louisville jumped ahead to nail a board in 1953. Got it wrong. His foreman pulled every nail in silence and waited. The boy watched it done correctly and repeated it. He stayed beside every man he worked with after that. Speed is not knowledge. Beside is where you learn. Number 25. The neighbor's task before your own rest. Before the day ended, you checked whether someone on the block needed work done. Widow with firewood, old man with leaves. A steelworker's son in Gary, Indiana, helped the same elderly neighbor every Saturday for 4 years before asking why. His father said that man has nobody. We are the nobody he has. The boy was 12. He was still doing it at 60. Those programs were discarded after 1970. The neighborhood held together one Saturday at a time. Number 24. A borrowed tool comes back cleaner than it left. If you borrowed a wrench or a level, you cleaned it before returning it. Not wiped, cleaned. Returned in person, hand to hand. A machinist in Flint lent his socket set to a neighbor's son in 1958. The boy returned it the next morning, every piece clean. 2 years later, when the boy needed a reference, the machinist wrote it without being asked. How a man returns what was lent tells everything about how he values what is his own. Number 23. Finish what Saturday started. If the task was unfinished by late afternoon, you kept working. Sunday was not a second chance. A plumber in Cincinnati told his son in 1954, "A man who leaves a job half done has lied to himself about what he intended." The boy ran his own crew 20 years later and said it to every man he hired. Boys who left early were not asked back. A half-finished job is a full-time reminder of what you chose not to do. Number 22. Ask for the next task. Do not wait. When you finished a job, you found the man in charge and asked what needed doing. Not "what do you want me to do?" a child's question. What needs doing? A working man's question. A bricklayer's son in Baltimore learned this at 10 and said the question changed every room he walked into. Men who had been talking stopped and gave him real work. Foremen kept invisible lists. The boy who looked for work was the man they called first. Here is what nobody says out loud. The average American boy in 1962 had a structured Saturday morning before a free afternoon. He rose, dressed, worked, and accounted for what he did. He had earned the rest. Then we decided structure was oppression. We handed boys unstructured mornings and called it freedom. What we handed them was emptiness with nowhere to put it. Boys without a task do not naturally invent purpose. They drift. They wait. And the habit of waiting, for someone to hand them a reason to move, never fully leaves a man who first learned it at 12. We took from them the one place where they first learned what it felt like to be needed. Number 21. Present the work before you take the pay. When the job was done, you brought the man to see it. You stood beside your work and let him look. You did not point out what went right. You waited. A roofer in Pittsburgh paid his son and 2 boys for Saturday work in 1959. Before any coin changed hands, he walked the site. Once, he made his son pull 6 shingles and relay them. The money was proof. The work was real, not the other way around. Number 20, the savings envelope. Every dollar earned was divided before any of it was spent. Savings first, household second, the boy third. At the kitchen table in front of his father, without renegotiation, a factory worker in Dayton started his son on a single dime in 1949. By 17, the son had $42 in an envelope his father had never touched. He bought his first set of tools with it. A boy who divides before he spends is practicing the one discipline that compounds. Number 19, work in silence when the man beside you is silent. When the man beside you went quiet, you went quiet. A sheet metal worker in Cleveland worked every Saturday beside his son through the 1950s and never told the boy to be quiet once. The boy learned by watching his father go silent when full attention was required. The silent apprentice was kept. The one who kept asking was sent home. A man who can work in silence knows his voice is not always the most useful tool he carries. Number 18, name the tool before you pick it up. Before you used a tool, you knew its full name, not the thing, not the whatchamacallit. A cold chisel was a cold chisel. A tool maker in Detroit required every Saturday apprentice to name each tool before touching it. A boy who did not know its name was not ready to learn what it was for. That requirement was abandoned after 1970. A man who names what he holds understands it differently from one who only knows how to grip it. Number 17, no complaint about the weather or the work. If it rained, you worked in the rain. If the task was dull, you did it without naming the dullness. A foreman in Memphis sent 2 boys home in 1958, not for working badly, but for announcing that the work was hard. He told their fathers. Neither complained on a job site again. Complaint was managed at home, never announced at the site. The weather did not care about your opinion. Neither did the work. Number 16, the handshake that opened the morning. When you arrived at a work site, any crew, any yard, you shook every hand before you touched a tool, not a wave. A hand given to each man, oldest to youngest. A carpenter in Knoxville drilled this into his sons before they were old enough to hold a nail. He said a man who reaches for the tool before the hand has told the job it matters more than the men on it. It was a refusal to treat another working man as invisible. They called it respect. Number 15, younger boys watch before they touch anything. If an older man or boy was already on the task, you watched before you joined, close enough to see, far enough to stay clear. 2 full repetitions before you asked to try. A boilermaker in Pittsburgh held this rule for every boy in his Saturday shop. He said a boy who watched first arrived knowing something. A boy who moved first arrived guessing. Every minute of watching saved 10 minutes of correction. Observation is not hesitation. It is the preparation that looks like patience. Number 14, say yes, sir, and mean it. When a working man gave an instruction, you answered yes, sir, not yeah, not a nod. Yes, sir, 2 words that told the man he had been heard before the action proved it. A union electrician in Cleveland enforced this with every boy on his Saturday crew. He said the yes, sir was not for him. It was for the boy. It trained the mouth to commit before the body could hesitate. Yes, sir was not submission. It was the decision said aloud. Number 13, the honest report at day's end. When the work was done, you reported. Not what you wanted the man to hear, but what happened, what you finished, what you did not. A foreman in Gary, Indiana, assembled his crew for a 5-minute accounting every week from 1950 to 63. A boy who inflated his report was not called a liar. He was simply not included the following Saturday. Reputation was never built on the work alone. It was built on whether the account of the work was true. In 2017, researchers at the University of Michigan studied what they called structured early responsibility in adolescent males. Boys given accountable Saturday work before the age of 14 showed significantly higher levels of purposefulness, financial stability, and relationship durability as adults than boys raised without it. The nature of the tasks mattered far less than the accountability. It was that someone cared enough to ask, expected completion, and listened to the honest account at the end. The men who built these rules had already run the study across 3 generations of front porches and factory yards. They already knew the result. Number 12. One new skill every Saturday. Every Saturday held one lesson, a new knot, how to read a level, how to sharpen a blade. One skill practiced until it became muscle memory before the day ended. A pipe fitter in Youngstown introduced one new thing to his son every Saturday for 7 years. By 15, the boy could do 43 things with his hands that most grown men on his block could not. One skill, one Saturday. That was the pace. Number 11. Stay until the man beside you is finished. You did not leave when your part was done. You stayed until the man you came with was finished, tools put away, and the site clear. If he had more work, you helped. If he was slower, you waited. A roofer in Albuquerque held this without announcing it. He never left before the last man, and his crew followed without being told. These men understood the job was never only the task, it was the man beside it. Leaving first was leaving him. Number 10. Sunday was earned by Saturday. Rest was not a right, it was a consequence. A boy who had worked Saturday fully and honestly to completion had earned Sunday. A foundry worker in Hamtramck held this with his 3 sons through the 1950s. The eldest left his work early once. The following morning, the unfinished task was waiting before breakfast. Sunday rest, once earned, carried a presence a granted rest never could. What you enjoy without earning is not enjoyment. It is only consumption. Earned rest is a different thing entirely. Number 9. Understand the why behind the task. You were not only told what to do, you were told why. Why the gutter needed clearing before frost. Why the blade needed sharpening before replacing. One sentence, sometimes fewer, but given and expected to be remembered. A carpenter in Richmond gave his son the reason behind every Saturday task from age 8 forward. By 14, the boy could diagnose a problem before he fixed it. A boy who knows only how is useful once. A boy who knows why is useful indefinitely. Number 8. 1. Saturday a month belonged to someone else. Once a month, the day was given away to an elderly neighbor, to the church, to a family that had fallen behind. No payment, no recognition. Your father drove to where the work was, got out of the truck, and you followed. A minister in Macon called it maintenance, not charity. Every man who refuses to oil the community borrows against the day he will need it to run. The boy who gave a Saturday away once a month grew up understanding that what he lived inside required keeping. Number 7. A word given on Saturday held all week. If you told a man you would return, whether to finish a task or to bring back a tool, that word was a contract. not polite intention. Binding. A hardware dealer in Tupelo measured every boy by one standard, whether what he said on Saturday matched what he did by Friday. He kept 2 years of boys in his memory and never confused a single one. The word given was the only document in the room. The only enforcement was a man's own name. Number 6, learn by watching, not by asking. Before you asked how, you watched. 2 full repetitions, until you could describe every step from memory. Then you asked, and the question had to be specific. Not, how do I do this? What happens if I hold it this way instead of that way? A machinist in Bridgeport told his Saturday apprentices that a question asked without first watching was an insult to the man demonstrating. Every answer you need is already in the motion of the man who knows. Number 5, hard work was not announced. You did not tell people what you had done. You did not inventory your effort. If you worked hard, the work said it. A concrete finisher in Louisville told his son in 1956, "The man who tells you how hard he worked has already started subtracting from it." Working-class America before 1970 understood hard work as its own complete sentence. It needed no subject, no modifier. What you do and what you say about it are not the same currency. Number 4, leave the site cleaner than you found it. When the work was done, you cleaned. Not just your mess, the whole site, every scrap, every tool returned, every surface swept. A roofer in Baltimore left every site immaculate in 1959, regardless of how brief the job. His customers remarked on the cleanup more often than the roof. He told his son, "The site is the last thing they see." The invisible standard, the cleanup no one assigned, was the character test the work itself could not give. Number 3, read the work before you started. Before you touched anything, you looked. You walked the site. You identified what was broken and what would have to move first. You determined the order before your hand touched a single piece. A plumber in Erie required his Saturday apprentices to spend the first 10 minutes of every job standing and looking, with no tools and no motion. He said a man who reaches for the wrench before he understands the pipe spends his morning undoing what 5 minutes of looking would have shown him. Working-class fathers called it looking before you reach. Number 2, stay until the man says done. You did not decide when the job was finished. The man in charge decided. When he said done, it was done. Not when your part was complete, not when you were tired. A brick foreman in Philadelphia moved young men off skilled work for calling it themselves. He said a man who decides unilaterally when a job is finished has already told you he decides unilaterally about everything. Waiting for that call was the bearing of a man who understood his judgment was not yet the only one in the room. Number 1, do what needs doing without being asked. That is all of it. No system, no list, no nudge from a father in the doorway. You looked at what needed doing and you did it, before you were told, before anyone knew it was needed. A milkman's son in Terre Haute came downstairs every Saturday for 9 years and found one thing to complete before his father appeared. He never mentioned it. His father never mentioned it. When the son was 17, his father shook his hand at the kitchen table and said, "I know what you have been doing." That was the whole of the praise. Boys who absorbed this rule did not need to be managed as men. Every other rule on this list was only ever this one wearing its work clothes. None of these rules required a curriculum, a seminar, or a single dollar. They required a father willing to get up first and a boy willing to watch what that meant. The generation that built these Saturdays understood something we have spent 50 years abandoning. A man is not built in a classroom. He is built in the deliberate, unglamorous repetition of doing what needs doing before he is told, before anyone is watching. We called these forgotten rules rigid, buried them, replaced them with nothing. The Saturday is still there. It still has the same hours. The only thing missing is the man willing to rise first and mean it.